Continue to follow breaking news tonight in the search for the body of 4-year-old Javeayah Harris after her parents confessed to killing her and her mother admitted to disposing of her body. Today, dozens of cars lined the outside of their home as investigators and the coroner's office sifted through evidence.
The community continues to mourn 4-year-old Javeayah Harris. The criminal case against her parents is entering a new phase. As legal experts say, investigators are still building their case and there are major decisions still ahead. And in just under an hour from now, the Winsboro community will be gathering to remember little Javeayah Harris. Just a little while ago, News 19 spoke with a criminal defense attorney and a USC criminology professor about what comes next in this investigation and the prosecution of Javeayah's death. Kiki Gushu has those details.
With both of Javeayah Harris's parents now charged, one of the biggest questions is whether Aiken County prosecutors could seek the death penalty. Criminal defense attorney Dane Phillips says under South Carolina law, this case could qualify.
So you have the death of a child under 11 and then the allegation of dismemberment. That is statutory aggravators. Those are statutory circumstances that would potentially allow a prosecutor to seek what we call a death notice to essentially state, because they have to do that legally, is specifically state and file a notice saying that they're seeking the death penalty.
Every parent is supposed to protect their child. That's why this case feels almost impossible to understand. Investigators say Javeayah had been dead for weeks, inside the very home where she should have been safest, before her mother ever called 911. That's the question everyone keeps searching for. Not just what happened, why, not just how a parent could do this, but what was going through their mind, what calculation, what fear, what moment of decision pushed two people past every instinct meant to protect a child, and into the thing investigators now say they did. Most channels covering this case won't answer that. They'll show you the warrants, play you the call, describe the search, and then stop right there. Because how could a parent do this is a wall. You hit it, you feel something, but you don't understand anything more than you did before. This episode is different. There's an answer here, not a guess, not a theory built on emotion, an actual, specific, mechanical answer. And I have to say this, before we go further. People will bring up the Lynette Hooker case in the comments, and I understand why. But this isn't that. That was a relationship homicide. This is the killing of a woman's own child. DNA confirms it. Java was her direct offspring. This isn't a comparison case. This is something else entirely. According to investigators and former prosecutors, the answer wasn't grief, wasn't panic, wasn't remorse finally catching up to her. It was a clock that had almost run out. And once you see what was closing in on her, every piece of this case falls into place. But there's something else this video will get into. Something most coverage of this case hasn't touched. Whether what happened inside that house is enough, legally, to put her on the list for the death penalty. Because in this state, that's not automatic. It depends on specific facts. Facts prosecutors are still deciding how to use. Something was about to happen to her, whether she wanted it to or not. Something she couldn't stop, couldn't delay, couldn't hide from. Understanding that one thing explains not just why she made the call, but why she made it on that exact night, and not a single night during the weeks that came before it. Type Javeayah in the comments with any emoji coming from your heart.
At 10 o'clock starts now. I'm Zaina Halliburton. Thanks for joining us. We're told today's search was just for evidence and not for Javeayah's remains. Your Ethan Hunter has been at the scene ever since this afternoon, watching investigators walk in and out of the home and into the woods, collecting evidence and taking photos.
Javeayah was 4 years old. Before any of this, she was just a little girl in Aiken County, South Carolina, the kind of age where everything is still new and everything is still safe, or supposed to be. By early summer, her mother, Michelle Herring, was weeks from delivering a second child, 39 weeks along. Close enough that a due date wasn't a distant thing anymore. It was a countdown. And around that same time, family members were still checking in the way family does, Javeayah's uncle had reached out more than once through messages, asking how she was doing, the kind of casual check-in that happens in every family and means nothing on its own. At the time, there was no reason to think it meant anything at all. Keep both of those details in mind, the due date and the uncle's messages. Neither one looks like evidence right now. That's exactly why they matter. From the outside, nothing about this family raised alarms. Michelle Herring and her partner lived in Aiken County, South Carolina, with Javeayah, going about the kind of routine that doesn't draw attention. Neighbors saw what neighbors usually see, nothing. But somewhere in that routine, a window opened. According to arrest warrants later filed in this case, Javeayah suffered an injury caused by physical conduct from her mother sometime between May 1st and June 15th, a stretch of roughly 6 weeks. 6 weeks where, the documents allege, neither parent sought medical attention for her, despite knowing she had been hurt. That's the first crack. Not a single violent night. A gap. Weeks where a decision not to act was made, over and over. Around this same window, that uncle reached out again. And this time, according to what would later surface, the answers he got back were different. Vaguer, slower, the kind of shift that means nothing until you already know what to look for, and everything once you do. Legal documents would later describe the pattern here in a specific phrase, circumstances showing an extreme disregard for well-being. That's not emotional language. That's the language investigators use when a pattern, not a moment, is what they're building a case around. And underneath all of it, a due date kept moving closer. Before we talk about the death penalty, there's something you need to understand and pay attention to.
4-year-old Javeayah Harris confessed to killing their daughter and getting rid of her body in newly obtained warrants. Plus, we're hearing the 911 call from Javeayah's mother the night she went missing.
She was outside playing, and I came out here after cooking dinner a little bit, and I'm looking for her, but I don't see her nowhere.
And tonight we're continuing to follow the investigation into Javeayah Harris's death and the search for her body that's still ongoing.
Warrants say both parents failed to get medical attention for Javeayah after suffering an injury from physical abuse between May 1st and June 15th. Her parents, Javeayah Harris and Michelle Herring, are both charged with homicide by child abuse, with Herring also facing a charge of filing a false police report. They were both denied bond over the weekend. DSS says the couple had another baby the same night Javeayah was reported missing. They say that baby is in the custody of another family member.
And tonight your Sydney Hood joins us in the studio to break down the warrants and the 911 call, which tell two very different stories, Sydney.
And in that 911 call, Javeayah's mother was very descriptive, from describing what Javeayah was wearing the night she reported her missing to what she was doing at the house as well. In that call, Michelle Herring tells dispatchers she stepped inside to cook dinner, told 4-year-old Javeayah it was almost time to come in, and when she came back outside, her daughter was gone. She says she last saw her no more than 20 to 30 minutes before that call. She tells the dispatcher she checked the chicken coop, where she says she finds Javeayah every day, and she wasn't there.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm on the way to you. Just to confirm, where was she in the house when you saw her last?
No, she wasn't in the house, ma'am. She been playing outside today. And
okay.
She asked me, can she play for a little bit more before it got dark, and I said yes. And I literally, her bath water is in the tub, ran, and dinner is cooking, and I came out here to get her, and I can't even find her.
Okay, is there a certain place she likes to play outside?
Usually in the chicken coop, and that's usually where I find her every day, and I just looked in here, and she's not in here.
From there, the questions turned into where Javeayah might have gone. Herring told dispatchers she had already checked the chicken coop and then checked in the wooded path behind their home. Herring also tells dispatchers that Javeayah is friendly, not afraid of strangers. Dispatchers asked if Javeayah had any health issues. Herring mentions autism, but no formal diagnosis had been made. She says, quote, she is very smart. She can carry on a full conversation. In the call, Herring also says that she is 39 weeks pregnant, telling dispatchers she cannot keep up with her daughter the way she normally would.
Me and my husband just now purchased in this house. I don't know about this area much, but it's not a good area. I'll tell you that. It's not good.
Okay, you say you searched the woods. Is that behind your house?
Yes, it's like a pathway right behind my house. And we usually take the dog sometimes in the woods to just let them run. And she'll come, so I know she knows about the woods. And but I look down the same pathway that we walk, and I do not see her.
We now know that everything in that call is not what happened. The arrest warrants that I have here say everything in that call is not true. Will, the warrants use strong language here, saying that both parents showed, and I want to read quote for quote here, extreme indifference to human life by not seeking medical attention for Javeayah after knowing she suffered physical abuse, which the arrest warrants say were at the hands of Herring.
And both parents are charged with homicide by child abuse, like we know. Herring also charged with filing a false police report, and on her warrants for that charge, they also mentioned that the mother had said that Javeayah was abducted. They conducted interviews. They found out that that wasn't true, and then that's when the mother also said that that she had gotten rid of Javeayah's body in another location. But going back to that 911 call, it is completely not true. So you hear the entire story as she's telling dispatchers. It's just unbelievable and shocking to hear that entire story happen, knowing what we know now. And she gave an entire description of Javeayah that night, even saying that she talked to her and that Javeayah said that she wanted to play outside a little bit longer and didn't want to come inside. The mother also saying that Javeayah was wearing pink Minnie Mouse pajamas and had pink beads in her hair that night. So giving a very descriptive image of what Javeayah looked like when she had gone missing. We know that's not true at this point, and that she had been deceased for at least a month before that 911 call happened. It's just unbelievable.
And knowing what happened in response to that 911 call, the massive search that started that Tuesday night, the hundreds of law enforcement that showed up to Bethel Baptist Church, which is the staging area that they met at before starting the search each day, knowing the amount of resources that went into the search, the thousands of acres that they covered, and the strangers that were worried about this little girl, wanting to find her, holding on to hope that she was out there somewhere. And well, we've said this time and time again, but the community response to this, I mean, even right now, you can hardly go on social media and not see Javeayah's face or her name, and that just goes to show you how worried this community was for this little 4-year-old girl who none of us knew this time last week. I mean, the memorial that is set up outside of our house, you see it right here with the Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse balloons, the pink candles, the stuffed animals. It really touches your heart to see how she has brought just a group of complete strangers together.
On the night of June 30th, a call went out. Javeayah Harris, 4 years old, reported missing. It triggered exactly what a missing child report is built to trigger. Search teams, volunteers, law enforcement from multiple jurisdictions. Roughly 5,000 acres searched across Aiken County in South Carolina. Heat that doesn't forgive anyone spending long hours outside. Hundreds of people gave up days of their lives to walk fields and tree lines looking for a little girl. According to what investigators would later allege, that call, the one that started all of it, was fabricated. Not a mistake, not a parent in shock misremembering details. A 5-minute account of events that, according to the arrest warrants, did not happen the way it was told. Which means every hour of that search, every volunteer in that heat, every officer coordinating a grid pattern across 5,000 acres was operating on a story that could not have been true because according to what's now filed, Javeayah had already been gone for weeks. Sit with that gap for a second. Weeks of silence, one call, and an entire county mobilized to search for a version of events that didn't exist. This is the moment everything from our cold open was pointing to. The call, the search, the heat, all of it built on a 5-minute fabrication. And the reason for the timing of that call is exactly what this video is going to answer. Missing child cases move fast in the first 72 hours, and investigators treat every detail as significant until proven otherwise, which means inconsistencies don't stay hidden for long. Statements from Michelle Herring and her partner about the timeline of that night didn't hold together the way investigators needed them to. Small gaps at first, the kind of thing that could be explained by panic, by shock, by two parents in the worst moment of their lives. But panic explains inconsistency for a night. It doesn't explain inconsistency for weeks. And as investigators pulled at the thread of who last saw Javeayah and when, the timeline being offered by her parents kept sliding further from what physical evidence and witness accounts could support. Somewhere in this stretch, that question resurfaces. The uncle's messages, the ones that had gone from routine to vague. Investigators don't need a smoking gun in week 1. They need a reason to keep pulling. And a family member who noticed something felt off, weeks before the world knew anything was wrong, is exactly that kind of reason.
Just a little while ago, News 19 spoke with a criminal defense attorney and a USC criminology professor about what comes next in this investigation and the prosecution of Javeayah's death. Kiki Gushu has those details.
With both of Javeayah Harris's parents now charged, one of the biggest questions is whether Aiken County prosecutors could seek the death penalty. Criminal defense attorney Dane Phillips says under South Carolina law, this case could qualify.
So you have the death of a child under 11 and then the allegation of dismemberment. That is statutory aggravators. Those are statutory circumstances that would potentially allow a prosecutor to seek what we call a death notice to essentially state, because they have to do that legally, is specifically state and file a notice saying that they're seeking the death penalty.
But Phillips says whether that happens is a separate decision. He says capital cases require years of preparation, cost the state significantly more money, and demand far more resources than a standard murder prosecution. He says prosecutors also have to consider whether seeking the death penalty is worth the time and expense, when a jury could still return a sentence of life in prison.
Way too early to tell, and ultimately it's at his discretion.
Investigators are still building their case. University of South Carolina criminology professor Scott Mortgus says that starts with building a timeline of everything that happened.
The timeline is the backbone of the investigation, right? It explains to investigators essentially everything that happened. So like they're trying to determine when was the child last known to be safe, when was the child first known to be missing or injured, who had contact during that window. Like the timeline is just really important to understand really the boundary of what the evidence they're looking for is.
He says detectives are likely reviewing surveillance video, digital records, forensic evidence, and witness statements. And even though arrests have been made, Mortgus says the investigation is far from complete.
Probable cause is not the same level as guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And so typically, in the vast majority of cases, you still see investigations occurring after the arrest to kind of shore up to that level of evidence.
And because investigators have recovered only partial human remains, he says prosecutors face another challenge.
But if you don't have a body to point to say that this death actually occurred, along with whatever forensic evidence you get from it, it just becomes extremely difficult. Is it impossible? No. But it's really, really hard and is a big hurdle to get over in cases like these.
Talk about the death penalty. There's something you need to understand. A charge is not a sentence. An arrest is not a verdict. And in South Carolina, the death penalty is never automatic, even in a case this disturbing. It has to be earned, legally, fact by fact, and right now, that process is still unfolding. So before we go further into this case specifically, let's actually understand how this works, because most people watching true crime for years still don't know the mechanics behind the word death penalty, and once you do, this case makes a lot more sense. Here's the first thing to understand. In the United States, no prosecutor can simply decide someone deserves to die and pursue it. Every state that allows capital punishment requires something called an aggravating circumstance, a specific legal trigger written into the law itself. Without at least one of these triggers present, the death penalty isn't even on the table, no matter how horrific a crime looks to the public. This exists because the law tries, however imperfectly, to reserve execution for a narrow category of cases, not simply the worst-feeling ones. In South Carolina specifically, lawmakers have written out a defined list of these triggers. They include things like the murder of a law enforcement officer, murder committed during another violent felony, multiple victims, and, relevant here, the death of a child under the age of 11. Legal experts reviewing this case point to two possible aggravators: Javeayah's age and allegations connected to what happened to her remains after death. Together, those two factors are enough to potentially qualify this case for what's called a death notice, a formal, legally required filing where a prosecutor states, in writing, that they intend to pursue execution as a sentence. Without that filing, a death sentence legally cannot happen, no matter what a jury might otherwise want. But here's the part most coverage skips entirely, and it's worth actually learning. Qualifying for the death penalty and choosing to pursue it are two completely different decisions, made by two different parts of the system. The law decides what's legally possible. A single elected prosecutor decides what actually happens. That's called prosecutorial discretion, and it's one of the most powerful, least understood tools in American criminal law. It means the exact same set of facts, in front of two different prosecutors, could lead to two completely different outcomes. Why would a prosecutor qualify for the death penalty and still choose not to pursue it? This is where it gets practical instead of emotional. Capital cases are not standard murder prosecutions. They take years, not months, because the law requires extra layers of review, specifically because execution is irreversible. They cost the state significantly more than a life sentence case would, sometimes many times more, once you account for extended trials, mandatory appeals, and specialized legal teams on both sides. And even after years of that process, a jury can still return a sentence of life in prison instead. So prosecutors have to ask themselves a cold, practical question. Is spending years and enormous resources worth it, when the more likely outcome, even in a death-eligible case, is often life without parole either way? Right now, according to legal experts following this case, that decision hasn't been made. It's too early, and it sits entirely with one office. Now let's talk about something else most viewers don't realize. An arrest does not mean an investigation is over. This surprises people every time, so it's worth actually explaining the standard involved. To arrest someone, police only need probable cause, a reasonable belief, based on evidence, that a crime likely occurred and this person likely did it. That's a relatively low bar. To convict someone at trial, the standard jumps dramatically. To guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard in American law. That gap between probable cause and beyond a reasonable doubt is exactly why investigations continue after an arrest. Detectives aren't just confirming what they already believe. They're building a case strong enough to survive that much higher bar. That work starts with a timeline. Investigators try to establish exactly when a victim was last known to be safe, when they were first known to be injured or missing, and who had access during that window. That timeline becomes the backbone of the entire case. The frame, everything else gets measured against. Surveillance footage, digital records, phone data, forensic evidence, every witness statement, all of it gets layered onto that timeline to either support or contradict what investigators believe happened. And then there's the hardest part of this particular case, one worth understanding on its own. Investigators have only recovered partial remains, not a complete body. In cases like this, that's not just a tragedy, it's a real legal obstacle. Forensic pathologists rely heavily on a complete body to determine cause of death, timeline of death, and manner of death with confidence. Without one, every other piece of evidence has to work harder to fill that gap. Legal experts are clear, this doesn't make prosecution impossible. Cases have been successfully prosecuted with partial or no remains before. But it raises the burden significantly, and it's a hurdle prosecutors have to be confident they can clear before committing years to a capital case. So here's what to actually watch for as this case moves forward. And these are the same signals worth learning to watch in any capital case you follow after this one. Whether prosecutors file that death notice at all, how soon they file it, since timing often reflects confidence in the physical evidence, whether the defense challenges the aggravating circumstances themselves, because qualifying legally and surviving appeal are not the same thing, and how the confession evidence holds up once it's tested in pretrial hearings, since confessions get challenged on voluntariness, conditions, and whether rights were properly read and understood, all before a jury ever hears a single word of it.
Explaining how the homicide by child abuse charge is so serious that only a circuit court judge can go ahead and make that decision. Our news crew, though, was in the courtroom and has tonight's update.
You've been charged with homicide by child abuse, which carries a prison sentence, if convicted, of 20 years to life. You understand that?
Behind me at the Aiken County Detention Center, both the mother and father of 4-year-old Javeayah Harris appeared in court Sunday morning as they faced charges in connection with her death.
Over the weekend, the Aiken County Sheriff's Office announced police believe Javeayah had been dead for about a month before she was reported missing. Both of her parents are now charged with homicide by child abuse and filing a false police report. Police say they are still searching for the 4-year-old's body.
A family and this community are hurting from this tragedy, the loss of a 4-year-old Javeayah.
Now, because both parents are charged with homicide by child abuse, no bond was set. Instead, the judge says that will be determined later by a circuit court judge at a later time.
You're here to have a bond set, but this court does not have the authority or the jurisdiction to set a bond for a sentence of a crime that could get you life in prison. So today's bond is being denied.
There's one more piece of this case, and it's the part that turned an already devastating story into something else entirely. It came from the Aiken County Sheriff himself in a press conference that visibly weighed on the man giving it. Sheriff Marty Sawyer stood in front of his community and made a choice with his words before he said anything else. He would not refer to Javeayah's parents as mother and father, not once. In his words, they didn't deserve those titles. 37 years in law enforcement, and he told the room this was one of the most disturbing investigations his office had ever worked. Here's what he confirmed. A small amount of human remains had been recovered, not where the search had focused for days, but in a different county entirely, in an area called Cedar Creek Reservoir, also known locally as Stumpy Pond, in Fairfield County. Those remains were sent for DNA analysis, and the results came back consistent with being the biological child of both parents. Then came the part that made this case something investigators said they'd never encountered before. According to the sheriff, forensic evidence and statements indicated that extensive, deliberate steps had been taken to destroy and conceal what happened to Javeayah's body. corrosive chemicals, tools used to accelerate that destruction. And once that process was carried out, what remained was taken to that reservoir in Fairfield County and disposed of there. The sheriff was direct about what that meant going forward. Because of the extent of what was done, he said it's unlikely the rest of Javeayah's body will ever be recovered. Divers from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources spent hours searching that water. Investigators searched for days before that in Aiken County, following a story that, as we now know, was never going to lead them to her in time. And still, this is likely as close to bringing her home as this case will ever get. New charges followed directly from this discovery. Destruction and desecration of human remains, filed against both parents, added onto everything they were already facing. It's worth sitting with the timeline here for a moment. The sheriff had already stated, in an earlier update, that investigators believe Javeayah had been dead for roughly a month before that 911 call was ever made, which means the disposal of her remains in a reservoir over an hour from where the search was happening wasn't a panicked, last-minute decision. It happened sometime during that same gap of silence we've been tracing this entire episode. The weeks where nothing was reported, where a search hadn't started yet, because as far as the world knew, nothing had happened at all. When reporters asked the sheriff how investigators knew to search Fairfield County specifically, he wouldn't elaborate beyond saying the investigation led them there. He also declined to say whether a single incident caused her death or whether it was something that built over time. Those details, he said, would come later, through the solicitor's office, not through a press conference. What he did say clearly was this: the investigation isn't over. Every lead is still being followed. And even with charges filed, even with a partial recovery, the case against these two parents is still being built toward trial. That night, the Aiken County community gathered for a candlelight vigil. People were asked to wear pink, Javeayah's favorite color, and to bring stuffed animals in her memory. The sheriff couldn't attend the start of it. He had another commitment that evening, but he made a point of saying, even in the middle of confirming one of the worst things his office had ever investigated, that showing up for that community and for a 4-year-old girl was still the job.
Good morning. I'm Marty Sawyer, and I'm the sheriff in Aiken County. Thank you for being here today, especially the citizens of Aiken that's come in. Thank you for being here. And I'm here to provide an update on the investigation that we've been investigating the death of 4-year-old Javeayah Harris. These updates never get easier to share. This past week has been heart-wrenching for everyone, but we've seen an outpouring of support in Aiken County and a massive joint law enforcement effort to search for and now to seek justice for Javeayah Harris. Personally, there's some very harsh words that I would like to use about Javeayah and Michela and their actions. But I will not do that. And I will not do that to protect and maintain the integrity of this case. But I will tell you this. I will not refer to them as mom and dad or mother or father. They don't deserve that title. I stand before you saying this is one of the most difficult, deeply disturbing, and emotionally taxing investigations this office has ever worked, and has weighed heavily on this sheriff's office all these other law enforcement agencies, all these people behind me that's worked tirelessly to bring this to an end, and it's weighed heavily on our community. I am truly sickened to share what this investigation has uncovered. From the moment Javeayah was reported missing, the sheriff's office, as well as our law enforcement partners and first responders, we responded with urgency, determination, and compassion. What started as an exhaustive and complex search quickly grew to something that I would have never imagined. Understand that I cannot discuss all the specific details in this case. But at this time, I can share that a few human remains were recovered in an area known as Cedar Creek Reservoir, also known as Stumpy Pond in Fairfield County. These remains were immediately sent to the State Law Enforcement Division, and through analysis, the DNA of the remains are consistent with being the biological offspring of Javeayah and Michela. I want to also share with you that through forensic evidence, statements, and analysis, extensive and deliberate efforts were made to destroy and conceal evidence following Javeayah's death. Our information reveals the use of corrosive chemicals and other tools that were used to accelerate the destruction of her little body. After this was completed, these two individuals poured what remains were left of Javeayah into the Cedar Creek Reservoir. These subjects went through great lengths to cover their repulsive and revolting actions. In my 37-year career in law enforcement, I have never, ever heard of anything so horrific. As a result of this information, it's unlikely that the entirety of Javeayah's body or any other remains from this point forward will be recovered. And I'll say this again, we had all hoped and prayed to find her body, but with the information we've uncovered, that's simply not possible. I want to also announce additional charges for destruction and desecration of human remains have been filed against these two individuals. I know this is heartbreaking for anyone who's followed this case. It's heartbreaking for our office, for all the law enforcement across the state that's worked on this case, countless hours to find every piece of evidence with the hope of bringing Javeayah home. It's heartbreaking to our community. Our commitment has been to pursue the truth regardless of how difficult it may be. While no announcement can lessen the profound loss in this case, our commitment remains unchanged. Today is not only about the evidence recovered, it's about a child whose life was taken far too soon. While today marks a painful chapter in this case, it does not end our work. Our investigators will continue to pursue every lead, examine every piece of evidence, and work closely with the Second Circuit Solicitor's Office to ensure that justice for Javeayah is pursued. I ask you to pray. Pray for Javeayah and her extended family, our staff, all these other law enforcement agencies, and this community. Again, I want to thank all these law enforcement partners, local, state, federal, other first responders who assisted in this case. But from the time I announced at my last press conference that the investigation had taken us outside of Aiken County, I specifically want to thank the State Law Enforcement Division, South Carolina DNR, and Sheriff Will Montgomery and the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. These DNR divers spent hours and hours and hours searching. Finally, I want to again thank our community. Throughout this investigation, you have demonstrated compassion, encouragement, patience, and prayers. We recognize the emotional impact this case has had on so many, and we thank you for standing with us. Together, this community has shown that even in the face of tragedy, compassion, unity, and service remain stronger than the darkness we've encountered.